This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese President Xi Jinping pays tribute to the country's heroes as the nation marks Martyrs' Day. China delivers humanitarian aid to Afghanistan ahead of the cold season. And still on the red list, South Africa protests quarantine restrictions for citizens traveling to the UK. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. A few more stories making headlines this hour. In business, Nigeria launches the website for its central bank digital currency, the e-Naira, ahead of its official rollout on Friday. And in sport, Tanzanian government offers free football tickets to boost COVID-19 vaccination numbers. September the 30th is Martyrs' Day in China. Chinese President Xi Jinping paid tribute to the country's heroes at a ceremony in Beijing this morning. Sui Huao reports from Tiananmen Square.
A moment of silence for the country's fallen heroes. Chinese President Xi Jinping led senior officials in a solemn ceremony for those who sacrificed their lives for this nation. They paid tribute at the monument to the people's heroes. Official figures say there have been 20 million martyrs since the First Opium War in 1840 until the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. In recent years, those who have died in the country's service include law enforcement personnel, peacekeepers, and medical workers. This year, thousands of representatives from different sectors of Chinese society also gathered to mark the occasion, including those awarded the July 1st Medal, the highest honor accorded to members of the Communist Party of China. China has passed legislation to protect the honor of the nation's heroes. In 2014, China's top legislature approved the September 30th as Martyrs' Day, a day before national holiday. In 2018, a new law made it illegal to defame heroes and martyrs or to distort and diminish their deeds.
Every year, the country's top leaders take this occasion to come here and commemorate the nation's fallen heroes. The message, even as China enjoys its stature as the world's second largest economy, it will never forget those who gave their lives for the nation's independence, peace, and prosperity. Cu Huiao, CGTN, Beijing.
The August 1st aerobatic team of the People's Liberation Army Air Force has also paid tribute to China's fallen heroes in Martyrs' Day. The team performed a series of stunts on Thursday morning at the ongoing air show China in the southern city of Zhuhai. Pilots guided J-10 fighter jets through loops and rolls, and they specially presented a white flower in the sky with arrow smoke to commemorate those who had sacrificed their lives for the country. The air show, held from Tuesday through Thursday, is the only international airspace trade show in China endorsed by the government. We'll head over to South America, where Ecuador's president has declared a state of emergency after a deadly prison riot. At least 116 people have been killed and 80 others injured. 6 people were reportedly beheaded. Authorities are calling it the worst penitentiary massacre in the country's history. Here's what the president had to say.
It is regrettable that prisons are being turned into territories for power disputes by criminal gangs. The Ecuadorian government will act. We must act. And the first decision we made is to declare a state of emergency in the prison system in the country.
The measure allows the government to deploy the police and soldiers to penitentiaries. It can also free up funds to ensure further security. The government has bolstered military presence outside the facility in Huayas province, where the violence happened. Security forces entered the prison with shields, but unarmed. Inmates, however, were equipped with high-caliber weapons. Authorities say the riot involved firearms, knives, and bombs. Relatives of inmates gathered outside demanding accountability from officials responsible for the inmates' safety. Well, a month after the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, lingering questions, criticism, and finger-pointing, top American military leaders appeared before lawmakers for a second day, answering tough questions about the U.S. exit, which ended America's longest war. Meanwhile, the federal government in the U.S. faces a potential shutdown over a debt ceiling. On Thursday, the Senate is expected to vote on a funding bill. Reporting from Washington, here's Carolyn Malone.
The three top military chiefs testified to the House on the second day of congressional hearings, and they said they did warn of a possible Taliban takeover in 2020, but the speed at which the Taliban took control hadn't been part of intelligence assessments. Well, General Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General McKenzie, commander of US Central Command, reiterated that they had earlier recommended at least 2,500 troops remain in Afghanistan. Well, the White House has said President Biden received split advice about what to do in Afghanistan. Well, meanwhile, the US Defense Secretary Austin also said he thinks the military did enable progress for people in Afghanistan over the 20 years they were there, and they pulled off a difficult job of the evacuations in the final days.
But I hope, as I said at the outset, that we do not allow a debate about how this war ended to cloud our pride in the way that our people fought it. They prevented another 9/11. They showed extraordinary courage and compassion in the war's last days. They made lasting progress in Afghanistan that the Taliban will find difficult to reverse and that the international community should work hard to preserve.
Well, the top US generals also expressed concern that the Taliban has not severed ties with al-Qaeda, which is the group, of course, behind the 9/11 attacks, with General Milley saying he's still not clear whether the Taliban will consolidate power or if Afghanistan will in fact fracture into civil war. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Washington.
Afghanistan remains among countries on the list of the world's poorest. The rapid power shift last month hit the economy hard. The country's new deputy prime minister says the government has made both short and long-term plans for economic development.
We have both strategic and tactical plans. In regard to the long-term economic development of Afghanistan, we are engaged in discussions with economic specialists. We are in consultations with these specialists and are tirelessly working on plans detailing how to develop our economy in the long run, so we can rid our economy of issues such as budget deficits. This is one part, but it will require some time and it's not an issue that can be dealt with in a day or two. Secondly, we have tactical plans that focus on issues that are currently at hand, so that in the coming winter, for example, we do not face shortage of food and basic necessities. In this regard, we have made some decisions today, and we will continue our meetings until we find a proper way forward on this issue. We have made some decisions. For example, we have allowed telegraphic transfers to facilitate import of food and basic necessities. This is a great development.
Meanwhile, the first batch of humanitarian aid recently pledged by China has arrived in the Afghan capital, Kabul.
The first batch of aid that reached Kabul today carries with it the deep friendship of the Chinese people. It shows that China will honor its commitment and treat its neighbors with kindness. It's a move that will help build a community of a shared future with neighboring.
The shipment includes items like blankets and warm clothes as Afghans brace for the cold season. Early this month, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi pledged to provide $30 million worth of food and medicine, as well as COVID-19 vaccines to Afghanistan. He also said that China was willing to help improve Afghanistan's infrastructure when the security situation was stable. Well, for more details regarding developments in Afghanistan, we're now joined by Ismarilai Abbasin, who's in Kabul for us. Thank you so much for joining us, Ismarilai. Good to see you. Ismarilai, it's been a month since the U.S. military withdrew from Afghanistan. How has life changed for people there under the Taliban?
Hello, Hannah. Well, life has changed in many aspects in Afghanistan for the people of the country. 14th of August, Kabul fell to the Taliban and the president and his team fled the country. On 15th of August, the evacuation process started at the end of 30th of August. All of the foreign troops left Afghanistan with damages to Kabul airport. Finally took less than a month to repair all the damages made by the US and coalition forces since that 15 days of the evacuation process. On 7th of September, Taliban announced their interim government in the country, and now 23 days of this government, and they have been striving to make difference in social life of the country, to make better relationship with the region, and ask international community to accept them as a permanent member of the international community. At the UN just ended a couple of days ago, and they nominated Sohail Shaheen as their permanent representative. On the other hand, the Taliban still face many challenges, particularly when we talk about the people of Afghanistan. The already started looming humanitarian catastrophe and economic crisis in the country is now worsening. It seems to be very much difficult for the Taliban, though according to Taliban accounts, they've been trying to make differences. But according to the people, they've been suffering a lot, and when the winter is close, it's much more difficult for the people, because from one side, there is less humanitarian assistance at this moment since last 45 days. And on the other hand, it's usually difficult for the people of Afghanistan, where there is no wages, very low income for the people, almost millions of people already starving in the country, and many more difficulties. That would be a hard winter for the people of Afghanistan.
When you talk about a hard winter, Marilai, we know that the first batch of humanitarian aid from China has been delivered to Kabul. It comes ahead of that cold season that you're speaking about. What are the most urgent humanitarian needs for Afghans at the moment?
Well, first of all, by the Taliban or the current Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the interim government, and the people of Afghanistan, we're appreciating and will appreciate any kind of humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan in this crucial time that the people are being gone through. And there is still fears about the winter. They will need shelters, they will need warm clothes, they will need food. Millions of children are now malnutrition, and that's another era. The mother and child care and health problems, which were previously assisted and financed by the United Nations and different organizations in Afghanistan. Now there are hundreds, and they have no assistance at this moment. While on the other hand, millions of other people in Afghanistan, they were the breadwinners of the families, and daily wages are already looming, and it's a worse situation. So everything, because of all those unprecedented and dramatic changes of from the fall of Kabul to interim government, and now the humanitarian and economic crisis, this is all belong to the future of Afghanistan, particularly when we are talking about the winter. That would be the toughest winter, and the people and also the current government in Afghanistan urging United Nations and the international community to first freeze the money of Afghanistan and the assets, and secondly, they have to make initiative to help the people of Afghanistan. Many experts in the country believe that the international community should separate two things: politics and humanitarian assistance, because there are millions of people in Afghanistan who need urgent support from the international community. Hannah.
Thank you so much for all that. Marilai Abbasin speaking to us from Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. A panel of experts has told the United Nations the internal displacement of people is one of the world's most neglected crises. More than 55 million people currently fall into that category, with the number increasing yearly. There are growing calls for governments to responsibly come up with solutions. Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Since the beginning of the year, more than 500,000 people in Afghanistan have left their homes to seek shelter in other parts of the country, forced out by Taliban fighting, heavy rains and flooding. Wednesday, a panel of experts appointed by the UN Secretary-General highlighted the scale of the problem of internally displaced peoples, known as IDPs, not just in Afghanistan, but across the globe.
The number of IDPs in the world is now at a record high for various reasons, including conflicts, climate, or a combination of the two. Despite this landscape, the issue has fallen off the radar. It does not receive the attention it deserves, and is often relegated to secondary levels compared, say, to the issue of refugees and migration.
One of the largest crises in the world is in Ethiopia, where the UN estimates 4.8 million people to be internally displaced across the country because of armed conflict. An earthquake in July led to over 1,500 Haitians losing their homes, adding to the thousands already uprooted by civil unrest. But it's not just in the developing world. The Internal Displacement Monitoring Centre says thousands were displaced by heat waves and wildfires in Canada and the United States earlier this year.
The high-level panel on internal displacement was established by the UN at the end of 2019 to come up with ways of better preventing and responding to internal displacement. In its report to the Secretary-General, it makes a number of recommendations, but says individual countries must come up with solutions for those displaced within their borders.
This includes systematically integrating internal displacements in national, local and urban development plans, and enabling internally displaced people to decide by themselves their future and reintegrate fully into society wherever it is.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres welcomed the findings of the report and said its recommendations would help shape the UN's response to helping internally displaced peoples going forward. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
Well, here in Africa, U.S. State Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed a raft of issues during a meeting in Cairo. They touched on local and regional matters, including the Grand Renaissance Dam, human rights, the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, and regional political concerns. Those concerns included a return to constitutional rule in Tunisia, the need for a civilian-led government in Sudan, as well as a plan to support elections in Libya. Sullivan's visit to Cairo comes after trips to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Let's time now for us to take a short break and return. Africa Live continues. Still on the red list, South Africa protests quarantine restrictions for citizens traveling to the UK. And more Tunisians taking to cycling to reduce environmental pollution.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent, to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa's real friends are those bridging the infrastructure deficit. China is doing exactly that through the Belt and Road Initiative. Roads, rail, sea and airports are opening up Africa. A clarion call to friends of Africa. Hard infrastructure is what we need to get out of poverty. BRI African Voices.
We love the trade. We love China.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. We head over to Nigeria now, where the death toll following weekend attacks in communities in Kaduna State has hit 45. Kaduna continues to face several security challenges. Reporting from Jos, here's Tese Makinde.
Kaduna State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs Samuel Iruwan says more corpses have been discovered in the villages, taking the death toll to 45. Unknown gunmen attacked the communities, killing locals and injuring 7 others. At least 84 people were killed in similar attacks in Nigeria in 2 weeks between June and July this year, with Kaduna and Zamfara states the worst hit. The Kaduna State government in July ordered the closure of 13 schools it considers vulnerable to attacks. The region has also seen a spate of kidnappings of students. The Nigerian government, through the National Communications Commission, has suspended mobile and internet connectivity in Zamfara State and some local government areas in Katsina and Sokoto states as a way to tackle the challenge of attacks by criminals in the country. Tessem Akende, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
Well, South Africa's government continues to protest the UK's decision to keep it on the red list of countries facing stringent restrictions when entering the UK. 8 countries, including Bangladesh, Kenya and the Maldives, have been removed from that red list. However, South Africa remains there. Local health experts have described the UK's decision as irrational. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is due to speak to Prime Minister Johnson over the matter. CGTN Angelis and Jamela has more.
South Africa is currently one of 54 nations from which arrivals to the UK must enter hotel quarantine. This quarantine will be at a personal cost for travellers. Under the UK's travel rules, travellers who have been in a country or territory on the red list in the last 10 days will only be allowed to enter the UK if they are British or Irish nationals or have residence rights in the UK. The UK says South Africa is on the red list because of the Beta COVID-19 variant. This is despite the fact that the Delta variant is the most common variant both in South Africa and globally. Local scientists have bemoaned this decision, and tourism associations have been campaigning to get South Africa off the red list.
There's been a national coalescence around this, that this is absolutely, in this day and age, pernicious and without basis of fact, and it essentially needs to be remedied.
Being included on the red list has placed a significant burden on local tourism. Refilwe Sibanda is one of many South Africans directly affected by this situation. She was employed at a hotel close to OR Tambo International Airport.
I personally witnessed for myself how the numbers of tourists coming in started dwindling. They used to come in their numbers. After a while, they told us that they had to let us go, and they gave us the same reasons, that there are now a few people coming in, and so they are no longer making money.
The relationship between Britain and South Africa is important economically.
The World Travel and Tourism Council has come out and done work in this regard, and their conservative estimate is that we lose 26 million rand a day. You know what they're doing there is that's an annualized figure. So they've taken the UK arrivals prior to COVID, 440,000, and throughout the year, on an average basis, we would lose 26 million rand a day. But we're going in. This is our traditional pickup of our high season. Our October arrivals are a third more than September. November is more than October. So conceivably, we would actually be losing more than 26 million rand a day. But it's not just the rands and cents. You know, that's the way we put a barometer onto it. But it's the jobs, it's livelihoods.
Jobs are really scarce, especially at this time of COVID. It's not like I can just go out and start marketing myself now. So I'm truly struggling.
Earlier this week, a delegation of South African officials and scientists met with their UK counterparts to discuss South Africa's continued inclusion on the UK's COVID red list for travel. At that meeting, it was agreed that the red list issue will be reviewed by UK authorities in the next 2 weeks. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Chinese government has donated 400,000 doses of its Sinovac vaccine to Democratic Republic of Congo. The donation comes amid a slow uptake of COVID-19 vaccines across the country. From Kinshasa, CGTN's Chris Omchamringa reports.
The first batch of China's Sinovac vaccines arrived in the DRC capital, Kinshasa. The vaccines were handed over to the DRC's health minister to boost the country's fight against the pandemic. The donation of 400,000 doses was welcomed by Congolese authorities.
The Sinovac vaccine will help protect our population and prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic that has killed more than 4 million people around the world.
China is the DRC's largest trading partner, and its officials have stood in solidarity with the country as it battled a range of health crises.
Aujourd'hui, nous venons d'accueillir 400 000 doses de vaccin Sinovac.
Today we have given the DRC government 400,000 doses of Sinovac vaccines. This illustrates the concrete efforts we're putting to help the Congolese population fight the pandemic. It's also part of our international cooperation with the DRC.
The DRC has been struggling to vaccinate its population because of widespread skepticism about the safety of vaccines and misinformation. According to government figures, only 87,000 people have taken the COVID jab out of the country's population of 90 million since April this year. The DRC has recorded 56,000 COVID-19 cases and over 1,000 deaths since March last year. The Sinovac vaccine has come a week after the US government donated 250,000 doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine under the global sharing facility COVAX. The arrival of the Sinovac vaccine has increased the options that Congolese citizens have regarding the COVID shot that they would like to take. But public health officials here still have a lot to do to convince people to get vaccinated. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, Chinese philanthropic organizations continue to help boost the country's education sector. In a ceremony, 28,000 specially packed school bags on panda packs were handed over. The joint initiative was launched by the China Foundation for Poverty Alleviation with the Alibaba Philanthropy.
With a handover of 20,000 panda packs, several Ethiopian primary school students will get a chance to improve their learning and living conditions. Each school bag comes with not only learning supplies, but also items which represent China and Ethiopia's cultural characteristics.
The importance of education can never be overestimated. It is true that education can decide the future of our country. China is our best example. China has grown to the second largest economy of the world in only half a century. One of the magical formulas is high emphasis on education.
The Panda Project was launched in 2019 by the China Foundation for Poverty Alleviation in conjunction with Alibaba Philanthropy.
Still is my strong hope that this cooperation, this support that we have been receiving from the Chinese government and also from the philanthropic foundations in China, including China Foundation, Alibaba Foundation, and all others, is going to continue in the education sector.
Mukuriai also thanked China and Chinese philanthropies for helping millions of Ethiopian children. In addition to the Panda Pack project, the China Foundation for Poverty Alleviation also runs several programs geared towards bettering the lives of Ethiopians. This includes the Smiling Children School Feeding Program, as well as programs geared towards providing schools with clean drinking water and empowering women economically. Astatal, CGTN.
Cyclists in Tunisia who are concerned about the environment take to the roads in the capital city, Tunis, and many other cities to highlight how cycling could be used to reduce pollution. Reporting from Tunis, here's Adnin Joashi.
According to recent data, the number of people riding a bicycle in Tunisia has increased by over 80% in recent years. This phenomenon is explained by an ever-increasing problem of traffic congestion and atmospheric pollution.
Environmental pollution is a real problem in the city. We are accelerating climate change with CO2 emissions. This summer, Tunisia recorded extreme temperatures while rain is scarce. The worst is yet to come for our planet if we don't adopt cycling, which is an environmentally friendly mode of transport. Cycling is good for humans and nature.
Dr. Suhayya Al-Alwini is a pediatric surgeon and a civil society activist. The 64-year-old cyclist says this sport and physical activity has many health benefits for young people and adults.
The bicycle is good for health because anyone can practice this sport at any age. Nearly all muscles of the back, the legs and the abdomen are working when one is cycling. Biking also burns calories and helps people lose weight.
More and more Tunisians are considering the option of cycling for short distances. However, the city of Tunis lacks the necessary infrastructure.
Many car drivers do not respect cyclists. We are raising awareness about the risk for people while biking in the city where the infrastructure for cycling does not exist.
We love biking and we encourage people to bike to work. Bike safely by wearing a helmet and carefully by avoiding accidents. That's how anyone can enjoy the ride.
Tunisian cyclists, environmental activists are campaigning for constructing state-sponsored bike-specific facilities in many regions across the North Africa. Bikes and cars are now sharing the same roads, while people here are campaigning to make roads safer for cyclists. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
As the rainy season begins in Uganda, people who live in wetlands are becoming forced to make hard decisions to either stay where they are or move. Environmentalists want to see more action taken to tackle climate change, saying the increased flooding is pushing many out of their homes. Reporting from Uganda, here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga.
A brick foundation is what is left of Swaibu Mubiru's former home. It's now a docking place for boats. Mubiru relocated his family to safer ground after flood in May this year. But there is more to worry about. He also owns a rental house, and now that is also going under.
From here where I am standing, we used to dock about 10 meters away, but the water level rose up to this place and swept away my house.
Mubiru's tenants have abandoned the house because of the rising water levels. He says without the income from his rental home, he's struggling to feed his family.
I used to get about $120 in rent out of my house, but not anymore.
Mubiru is not alone. According to the government, as many as 40,000 people have been displaced by rising water levels. Heavy rains began in April last year, forcing Lake Victoria to flood. With more rain still pounding this region, the locals here are worried that the lake could burst its shores again and displace them further from this area. Environmentalists say global warming and the destruction of the natural ecosystem are intensifying flooding in this area.
Cutting trees, we are cutting plants. We are overgrazing, we have a lot of cows now, we have a lot of animals, and that means when there is little grass on the surface, then the surface is dry, is exposed, and when it rains, water does not spend a lot of time on the surface, so it runs. So we're going to see more of extreme cases.
Uganda has recently enacted a climate change law to protect fragile ecosystems. And as the second rainy season begins, the government is encouraging people who live in the wetlands to move to higher ground. For people like Swaibu Mubiru, that may be easier said than done. Hilary Isga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
The day's business news after this short break, including Nigeria launches a website for its central bank digital currency, the e-Naira, ahead of its 2021, buoyed by the reopening of the services sector.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for the business news. Nigeria is getting ready for the pilot launch of its new digital currency, the e-Naira, for October the 1st. Africa's biggest economy will be the first country on the continent to launch its own digital currency. The e-Naira is being issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria and will be regulated by the Apex Bank. CBN launched a new website on the 27th of September that would act as the new currency's official platform. The site registered more than 1 million visits within 24 hours. According to CBN, the e-Naira would operate as a wallet against which customers could hold existing funds in their bank accounts. The new digital currency is also expected to boost cross-border trade and enable better macroeconomic policy formulation. The European Union's General Court has annulled agriculture and fishing agreements with Morocco over the disputed Western Sahara region. The agreements are to be terminated over a certain period to ensure the EU respects commitments it has already agreed to. The court argued that Morocco did not have the consent of locals affected. It ruled in favor of the Front Polisario independence movement, which had filed the case back in 2019 on behalf of the Sahrawi people who populate the region. The EU and Morocco swiftly issued a joint statement saying they would act to ensure continuity of bilateral trade, and a senior Moroccan diplomatic source told Reuters that he expected an appeal against what he called an incoherent ruling. The front has been fighting for the Western Sahara's independence from Morocco. The North African kingdom has occupied the vast, mineral-rich Western Sahara since 1975 and considers the former Spanish colony its southern province. We head over to East Africa now, where Kenya's central bank governor Patrick Njoroge says he expects economic growth to rebound this year. The growth is to be spurred by the continued reopening of the services sector, a recovery in manufacturing and stronger global demand. However, this growth could be curtailed by the impact of drought on the agricultural sector. Growth this year would be 6.1% and 5.6% in 2022. Njoroge told a virtual news conference last year's economic contraction of 0.3% was limited by policy responses that kept the economy from shrinking more. On Tuesday, Kenya's central bank held its benchmark lending rate at 7%, with its monetary policy committee saying it had taken note of emerging local and global inflationary pressures. In Somalia, the completion of a 30-kilometer highway connecting the capital Mogadishu to the town of Afghanistan is being hailed as the greatest infrastructure achievement in 30 years. CGTN's Wanja Mugai with that story.
This tarmac road connecting Somalia's capital of Mogadishu to Afghanistan town is a major infrastructural milestone. It is considered the longest tarmac road project to be completed since the collapse of President Siad Barre's government in 1990.
What has brought about the delay in the construction of this road is the security. We wanted to ensure there's security first, since a lot of people, both locals and foreigners, worked here. A lot of people died during the construction of the road to Afghanistan, especially construction workers. The Al-Shabaab militants were opposed to the construction of this road.
Militants are reported to have killed dozens of construction workers since July 2019, when the construction work began. Despite these attacks and other major stumbling blocks, the $200 million project funded by the Qatari Investment Authority eventually succeeded. It's now a great relief for the locals. It links the capital to the agricultural town of Afghanistan, northwest of Mogadishu. Before its completion, delays, costly bus fares and insecurity were common challenges. Ali Hassan Omar, a fruit vendor in Mogadishu, is among the jubilant businessmen.
We used to get our vegetables late, but thank God now it arrives within 30 minutes. Initially, we had to wait 2 to 3 hours, or at least 1 hour 30 minutes. The pawpaw used to get spoiled on the way. We thank God that the problem has been solved.
I am very happy about the construction of this road. It is all good for use now. We thank the government. I used to spend 2 to 3 hours to travel to Afghanistan. Today, I am very happy. That time has reduced to 20 or at most 30 minutes.
This success story is seen as a boost for a country that has suffered massive economic and infrastructural losses due to a prolonged civil war. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Africa's largest airline, Ethiopian Airlines, is said to recover faster than the rest of the carriers on the continent. According to projections by the International Air Transport Association, the airline is expected to bounce back to pre-pandemic levels in 2023, a year ahead of the rest of the continent. Your CGTN's Giram Chala with more details from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa.
Africa's largest and most profitable airline, Ethiopian Airlines, is living up to its name. According to reports from the industry representative, the airline is fast recovering from the hardship caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And compared with the rest of the continent's progress, ET is by far standing in a better position. And what makes this much more interesting is Ethiopian Airlines have achieved success without any government bailout. In its latest analysis, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, says passenger traffic to, from and within Ethiopia in June 2021 was only 30% below the comparable period for 2019. That also represented a 17% improvement between January 2021, which was 47% down on January 2019 and June 2021. Ethiopia's performance in June was well ahead of the negative 66.6% recorded for the African continent compared with 2019. So by and large, Ethiopia's air transport industry is recovering faster than the rest of the continent, and its progress is pegged on a more measured approach to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Passengers' demand now is expected to recover to pre-COVID levels by 2023. Air transport contributed $4.2 billion to Ethiopia's GDP in 2019, and its aviation sector, which directly employed 19,000 people and supported more than 1.3 million jobs across the wider economy. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Zimbabwe has adopted a more ambitious target for emissions reductions ahead of the 26th annual UN Climate Change Conference in November. The southern African country is committed to a 40% drop in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 across all sectors of its economy. Zimbabwe had previously committed to a 33% emissions reduction in its first nationally determined contribution in 2017. NDCs are non-binding plans for climate action submitted by countries since the Paris Agreement of 2016. The new target seeks to have Zimbabwe's total greenhouse gas emissions reduced to 44.7 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030. If no action is taken, emissions are projected to hit 75.4 million tons by then. Well, South Africa's biggest metropolitan areas are forging ahead with plans to secure their own electricity supply. The country's main power generator, Eskom, has struggled to keep up with demand for more than a decade. A green light from the state gave municipalities a go-ahead to acquire electricity from independent sources. And as CGTN's Julie Shai now reports, the city of Cape Town has taken it a step further and is planning to build its own renewable energy plants.
Most of South Africa's power is produced from coal. Cape Town is going the greener route by buying clean energy and building its own renewable energy plants.
We're looking at projects of the size between 5 and 20 megawatts in terms of that power range. And we'll be looking at those projects to be embedded directly on our network. And then in the course of the next 6 months, we'll be looking at initiatives to actually procure power from the open market, and that could be anywhere in the country.
Cape Town is one of 3 of the biggest municipalities trying to reduce dependence on the national power grid. The country has long depended on state-run Eskom, which has failed to provide a stable supply.
Eskom currently does not have sufficient capacity to meet not only the existing demand, but also the projected growth in demand, which is important for economic growth. So we think that it's time that municipalities also make a contribution in that space. It also means that local economic opportunities are created, which I think is critical towards the sustainability of cities and towns in this country.
This is a floating solar plant. It is very popular back in Europe. It's being piloted in South Africa and could prove to be a very useful tool for local farmers.
The plant generates electricity to run the farm and saves water.
There's obviously very high demand for electricity in your pack houses and that sort of thing, where the arable land surrounds those areas. So we don't have space for ground mount solar. So everyone has an irrigation reservoir where you've got plenty of space to be able to use for floating solar.
The city, which is also a favorite among tourists, is working hard to cut carbon emissions.
We are moving towards net zero carbon status, and we see ourselves as a responsible corporate citizen. And I think to further that, we're looking at options such as renewable energy, along with other initiatives such as maximizing energy efficiency, particularly within the public space.
Meanwhile, to strengthen the power grid, South Africa is planning a new 2,500 megawatt nuclear plant. Cape Town has the continent's only nuclear site, which was built during the apartheid era and has served most of the city's needs for close to 30 years. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, staying in South Africa, potato farmers are up in arms over a recent lapse in tariffs that protected the industry from the dumping of products from the EU market. The country's potato sector says without the anti-dumping measures, it's at risk of below-cost frozen French fries flooding the market from countries such as the Netherlands and Belgium. With that report, here's CGTN's Travis Andrews.
South Africa's potato industry is an important job creator in the agricultural sector, which employs over 45,000 seasonal and permanent workers. The industry, though, believes these jobs are at risk due to the lapse of tariffs protecting it from dumping. The EU market is of particular concern, and the dumping of frozen French fries the product of threat.
It is of concern to us. We have managed to, or we were under protection for a substantial period of time already. And it proved to be beneficial to the potato community in South Africa as well. So currently, what we need to do is to try to replace or put back those type of tariff protection that we used to have as soon as possible.
The lack of protection means that imported potato products can be priced below locally sourced ones. The dumping is usually as a result of excesses in the outsourced market, which can benefit and harm consumers.
Due to bilateral agreement, we ought to take some of that excess, and the excess mean do some good in South Africa also, in terms of the fact that it may lower prices. But if those prices are lowered to the detriment of the farmers, then it's not a good thing.
While the sector contributes over $500 million to the national GDP, the dumping of products could have an overall ripple effect on livelihoods.
If you're a seasonal producer, you've got 6 months in the market, it's not a very good thing to try to turn around whatever you're doing production in a very short period of time. So we need to get consistency and to reduce volatility. And unfortunately, imports can happen in a very varying way in terms of volumes and prices, which can have a detrimental impact to our consistency in terms of delivery and price as well.
According to industry stakeholders, South Africa has long been a prime destination for the dumping of frozen processed potato products. Now, without the anti-dumping tariffs, the cost price squeeze could deter many local producers from entering the market, and this could even lead to a market shortfall in the future. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, your sport news is coming up after the break, including Tanzanian government offers free football tickets to boost COVID-19 vaccination numbers.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We head over to Tanzania, where in an attempt to get its citizens vaccinated, the country's government is offering free tickets to football fans to watch matches in exchange for being vaccinated against COVID-19. So far, less than 1% of Tanzania's 60 million people have been vaccinated against the disease. CGTN's Isaac Lukanda has more.
As an incentive to get millions of football fans in Tanzania vaccinated against COVID-19, the country's Football Federation and the country's Ministry of Health are now offering free tickets to football matches. By offering free vaccination services along with free tickets at football matches, the government hopes to achieve its goal of vaccinating at least 60% of the population. Since the country's COVID-19 vaccination campaign began in late July this year, only around 350,000 doses have been administered out of the first batch of 1 million doses that arrived in the country. For the nation's biggest derby match pitting Simba and Yanga, two of the country's biggest clubs, free tickets were being offered to the first 100 spectators to get vaccinated. Despite a slight improvement in the number of people showing up to get vaccinated, COVID vaccine hesitancy is still prevalent across the country. Inadequate information on the COVID-19 pandemic, concerns about the safety of the vaccines, as well as religious and political beliefs, have kept many from getting vaccinated. President Samia Suluhu Hassan believes education will be key in getting the public on board with the country's vaccination agenda. The Tanzanian Football Federation says the plan to incentivize football fans to get vaccinated is long-term. With millions of fans vaccinated, it hopes to get the World Football Governing Body FIFA to allow fans into stadiums to watch the international games hosted by the country. In a bid to bring vaccination services closer to its people, the government says it has set up over 1,500 COVID-19 vaccination centers across the country, with thousands more in the pipeline. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Turning to the 2022 World Cup qualifying race.